Hi, everybody. This is Paul Hitchcock. I'm the founder and president of Giant Jacks Media. Welcome to Giant TV, where I bring value to you. I'm really excited about my guest here today, Christine Pouliott, who is an incredible Vistage Chair in the Greater Minneapolis area, and Ross Hartmann, who is the founder of Kingo AI. And we all know that's a very hot topic. We're going to get into this. Really excited about this subject. I want to start, Christine, with you. Obviously, you're working with CEOs, C-suite executives. Tell us what's going on with your practice and how AI might be coming up in your discussions.
Sure. Happy to do that. So my practice is a little over a year old. So we're a new group here in the Minneapolis area. Strong and growing, I would say. We've been talking about lots of different things, and one of the biggest hot topics for us right now is the economic environment. What's the impact of both the combination of an expected downturn next year, along with some rising opportunities in 2025? And from an AI perspective, how do we best prepare for that? The labor market here is very tight. And how do we find ways to become more and more efficient so that we're ready for 2025 in a way that allows us to do more without having to hire additional people?
Yeah, and Christine, you've got some pretty dynamic leaders in your group there. What are some of the industries that you're working with right now in your group, and what are you looking to add?
Yeah. So within the group right now, we've got a wide mix of manufacturing, construction, architecture and engineering, logistics, software as a service, healthcare services, retail, logistics, a great mix of people. Things that we're looking at are anything from, how do we optimize our office processes and procedures? How do we find ways to embed AI into manufacturing and construction and things like that? How does that play in? And so everyone's a little bit curious about it, but not actively using it right now.
Right. Yeah. And you have some seats open in your group looking to add different industries?
Yep. Still looking to grow the group. We're a really solid group right now, but continuing to grow, very selective with choosing the right people that we want to have around the table.
Yeah, because I know, I mean, you and I obviously have talked a lot offline, and when you have a mix of great leaders like you have in your group, you got to get the right people in there that are a fit also, right? So it's kind of you want to make sure that they fit the group and get along.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ross, awesome. We're going to jump into you, and we want to hear all about AI. And I know your mic is on mute right now. So, yeah, there you go. The AI guy has his mic on mute. What's going on?
Of course. It's the AI taking over.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't me. So, Ross, tell us about yourself and what you're focused on, and let's get into this.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul, and thank you, Christine. So my name is Ross Hartmann. I'm the founder of Kingo AI, and we do enterprise SaaS AI software, typically focused around giving companies AI brains. And that's essentially where we tie AI to your company's data and kind of unlock new workflow automation, essentially. So I know, Christine, you were mentioning that some of your members are curious, but maybe they haven't really implemented it at all or haven't used it. And it's kind of interesting. There's a stat that I like to cite from this recent survey that 85% of American workers now say that they have used AI in their job in some form, which is amazing to me because, first of all, more people are using it than we might think. And then this next stat is kind of interesting. 69% of American workers say that they're afraid to talk to their manager about their use of AI for fear of being replaced by those same tools. So
interesting.
Maybe 85% of your workforce is using AI, but most of them are not willing to admit it, right? So you've got this issue then, we can talk about whether it's an issue, where most of your workforce is using AI, but nobody's willing to come out from the shadows and talk about their use of it. And there are, there's security concerns and data privacy concerns for sure. And so we want to talk about that as organizations and how we can properly use AI out in the open and make sure that we're not sharing confidential proprietary information, make sure our sensitive information is still staying secure and being used appropriately.
Yeah, and Ross, obviously the thing that comes up a lot, and Christine, you were mentioning it before we started here, is that businesses are so curious and they're not really sure like what I should be asking or what does AI do. Everyone's focused on Chat GPT, which is great, but as you say often, Ross, and maybe expand on it now, that I mean that's one piece of AI. There's much more to it, but when you start talking to businesses, what do you get into with them? How do they understand how to use it? And what's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, it really is amazing, honestly, and the number of ways that it can be used and how our first inclination, we just kind of go to ChatGPT and like, oh, this is cool. This can write some poems and maybe do a song or something. That's fun. But it goes to so much more because when you start to think of it as a logic layer, well, now instead of thinking, what can AI do? Instead, think, what do I already do in my business that takes time? And then how can we apply AI as a workflow automation tool to start to maybe not fully replace some tasks, but at least to be able to reduce their time by 80% even, or to improve quality as well. So if you have tasks that are requiring 3 teams to QC each other, right? Well, now the AI can also act as one of those QC members, which can be pretty powerful as well. When you think about some of the other applications, we were talking about how it's hard to find folks, right? The labor market is tight, and that seems to just always be the case nowadays. And we don't know if that'll ever be fixed. But part of this is also that you can free up employees to not focus on repetitive menial tasks anymore, so that they're focused on things that are more creative and engaging. And that obviously improves employee engagement. They enjoy their job more. You reduce turnover in that way. And so when you have AI just start to do those repetitive tasks, you're improving employee retention as well.
Interesting. And some of the industries that Christine mentioned that she's working with in her group, and you said, project management and stuff like that. I mean, that's a big focus area, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking a little bit, we've got folks in manufacturing or construction in some way. AI can help with project management in a number of ways. I mean, it can help write schedules. It can just communicate with key stakeholders, right? Make sure everyone's getting the answers that they need immediately, essentially, staying on top of the status of projects, deliverables, essentially. But it can also be used for estimation. It can look at past estimates and kind of compare that versus what maybe a request for proposal is saying, and then put together a proposal for you. It's kind of a first draft machine, gets you 70 to 80% there. You still have to have your humans finish the last 20%, but it can really just speed things up and make for a more enjoyable workplace, honestly.
Yeah. Christine, do you have a question?
Yeah, Ross. So when you're talking to a business who really doesn't even know where to start, what's the first step? I mean, how does a business start to even think about where can this actually bring value to me and my business?
Yeah. So I've worked with a number of companies now where I kind of go in and they do a brain dump essentially of their operations and their procedures and everything. And what I am looking for is just, where are you experiencing pain right now? And sometimes that's because things are taking too long. Sometimes that's because the quality isn't high enough, for instance, or it's just a painful process. And so those are the things that I would really look for. I mean, it's a business problem, right? AI is a tool. And so if we instead say, okay, where can we fit AI into this? Let's not think like that. Let's say, what are my business problems? And now maybe AI as a tool can apply to those. And so just because it is such a generalized system of thinking, it tends to be applied in areas where we have knowledge work, which obviously is a lot of administrative work. Pretty much anywhere where there's not physical work, AI can likely lend a hand in some way. So to start, what does a business start? Look at those tasks and those roles where things are not performing as well as you want, or things are taking too long, or your team is you're spending too much money on something, essentially, where you want to ease some pain.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So Ross, how does that play out with a company when you're going in there? I mean, are you meeting with the executive management team, the owners? Uh, is that sort of a project where it's like a month project to kind of look at what they're doing? Like, what is your execution when you're going in there?
Yeah, really good question. So it's a bit of a mix of both strategy and the strategists at the company and the tacticians. So you want people who are able to look at the business goals and objectives and what's actually trying to be done from a broad perspective. But then you also need the tacticians in there, the people who are on the ground day to day manipulating spreadsheets, right? Because we need to see exactly what they're doing and what is taking the time. And so it is, a more in-depth process where you go into the company, you find out what are our objectives, what are the different departments, what are they trying to accomplish, but then let's bring in people who are actually doing this on a day-to-day basis. Let's look through what they're doing, and then let's start to suggest, okay, can AI help here? Is there any sort of workflow automation we can put in place? And sometimes the answer is, you know what, there's already a third-party tool that exists to do this. We just haven't taken the time to understand what we're doing. So often we're working in our business, it's hard to take the time to stop and work on our business, right? And so this can be a moment where we do that as well. It's just a full kind of forensics of the entire business process, where at the end, sometimes we suggest AI.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And so, how do you measure results of AI and increase productivity at a firm? That's always a big deal. People spend money on AI, and they go in there. What do you look for going forward to say, okay, is it working? Is it a constant, tweaking of things as you go forward? And I know you said before, AI is as dumb as it's going to get right now, right? It's only going to get better. So, is there an evolution to this whole thing too?
Yeah, I mean, well said. And you're asking the right question. One thing I typically do, or I suggest, is putting together a sort of pilot program for these tools so that you give one team access to AI, for instance, and another team no access, and they're performing the same kind of task. If you've identified a task that could most likely benefit from AI and you've implemented the right tool and you've done the right training, then you want to measure the quantitative output between the teams. Is the team that's using AI actually getting better results quantitatively, right? And so you can essentially run a pilot program and measure the ROI in that way. But it's not just quantitative productivity, it's also qualitative. So are employees enjoying themselves more? If you said, the next week, actually, we're going to take that away, you can no longer use AI, are they going to be a little bit bummed because now they have to go back to some of those repetitive tasks that they had AI doing? So that's one way to start measuring kind of the ROI and does it make sense? And then tweaking, kind of tweaking your processes and procedures and staying on top of this. I think you make a great point. AI is changing all the time, right? More than half of my job is just staying on top of the latest changes. And honestly, you do have to stay on top of what's going on, and you do want to refine the processes. You do want to refine the tools that you're using to get better and better. If you get more technical, you can go into a process called fine tuning, where you actually modify the model specifically for your task, and you can tend to get better results that way. And then on top of that, like you were saying, this is the worst it's ever going to get, right? So Google's coming out with their model called Gemini this fall, I believe. They say that's going to be better than GPT-4. So you have these massive tech companies one-upping each other in terms of the capabilities of these systems. We might as well take advantage of that.
Yeah, fascinating. And somebody told me a comment recently. I thought it was interesting when it comes to AI. Is he was saying that if your processes are broken already, or you've got it's not working, or the content you're putting out, he was applying this in some cases to writing and content you put out there. If that's lousy already, AI is not going to make those things better, right? You've got to fix those things first. And I imagine that's part of using AI, is it gets you to focus on the processes. Hey, maybe we need to make this better before we start plugging in AI to amplify it or do whatever it's going to do. Fair statement?
But that's fair. It is not a magic bullet, right? It's not something that a silver bullet. It's not something that's going to fix all of your woes. It's something that can make things better, essentially. But to your point, you need to have a strong foundation. you need to have the prompts in place. And there's this whole process called prompt engineering, which is knowing, how do I talk to the AI to get the best results out of it? That's called prompt engineering. You can learn more at learnprompting.org, for instance. And it's just, how do I talk to the AI? And essentially, the better you get at that, the better results you get out of the AI. So as we kind of train the workforce in this new AI first world, it's not enough to just say, here's ChatGPT, you're going to be 30% more effective now. Instead, we have to say, here's AI, here are the strengths, here are the weaknesses, here's where you don't want to use it. Here's what hallucinations are. Here's what prompt engineering is. And here's how you work with it to get the best out of it, right? So it is something that, it's just a tool. We have to learn it just like we would learn Salesforce or something. It's something that we have to train on, essentially.
Yeah, no, that's great input. I got to tell you this because it's funny, and it's just a pedestrian use of GPT. But my daughter is interviewing for jobs. You'll love this, and she's got an offer. She says, "How do I respond to this offer?" And I said, "Ever heard of GPT?" And so I'm with her. I plugged her in. I said, "How do you respond to an offer?" And it kicked out awesome, 10 examples. Hilarious. I mean, but it is applicable.
And that, just really quick, I want to say you have the right mindset, because it's a behavior change. I always tell folks, if there's one reason why AI is going to fail in your company, it's not because you haven't put the right technology in place. It's not even because you haven't put the right training in place. It's because people don't remember on a day-to-day basis, oh yeah, I can use this. And you have the right mindset to say, you know what, I have a problem. Let's try to solve it with AI, or let's use AI as a problem-solving partner, essentially.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it, because just like you have a Google tab open, you have the GPT tab open. It's a tool right there. I mean, Christine, have you tried it? Have you used it at all a little bit?
I've played with it, but mostly for fun. I used it to interpret my MRI results, so it could explain what all the terminology was that was in the MRI and the results. So it put it down into layman terms for me. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah,
and some other things, but. Ross, I'd love to hear an example of a success story. I mean, where have you seen a highly successful implementation of AI, and what kind of company and what did they gain from it?
Yeah, so I'm working with a number of CPAs actually who are finding it incredibly valuable. I'm sure you can imagine they do a lot of spreadsheet work, and there's a lot of room for workflow automation, but then there's also it's kind of interesting. This gets a little more advanced, but the AI can actually write its own code. And so what that unlocks is the ability for the AI to kind of write its own programs and execute those programs on your documents, let's say. And so I was working with a CPA company. They wanted to see how do we search between accounts to find a specific transaction amount, to see maybe one where one was debited from one place or credited from another, and locate that. And the AI was able to help with that. So there's tons of these success stories in just putting together basic workflow automation and what folks are doing. So there's workflow automation from one sense, and I think that is hugely valuable from a long-term competitive advantage. But there's also just basic question and answering, which is huge. I work with a number of companies for that as well. If employees no longer need to spend 10 to 15 minutes, looking in Google Drive or SharePoint for documents, but they can instead say, hey, what's our policy on that holiday, or what's our process or procedure for this? They just ask the AI and it just responds and then cites the document where it found it. So yeah, tons of application.
Yeah, and that's interesting because this gets into your AI brains you talk about that get embedded into a company where your brain looks down at all of the the systems and apps and processes that the company is using and can manage.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you tie the AI to your company's data, that's where the magic starts to be unlocked, honestly. And it's not just tying to documents, it's also tying to any third-party software you have. So if you want to start pulling reports from Power BI, but you don't want to hire 17 consultants to tell you how to write the report, you can just ask the AI, hey, can you generate this report for me based on our financial data? And it'll just do that and pop that out for you, and then put that in downloadable form, and then say, hey, can we put this on a PowerPoint? And it'll do that. So it does start to become incredibly valuable.
I'm curious, Ross, what are you noticing with these company owners and their concerns about the AI access to all of my data? What
Sure.
are the risks that they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, data privacy and security is obviously top of mind. And so when you do something like this, you want to make sure that you have the necessary processes in place to protect your data. So you typically want the AI to be deployed on your intranet, your secure place where all of your data already is, and or you want to have a connection to the AI model that is end-to-end encrypted, for instance, or encrypted in transit. You want to make it so that it is totally secure from a cyber perspective. But then there's also the data privacy perspective. So you want to say, okay, am I sharing my data with an AI tool creator that is going to be storing my data? Or is it going to be just used ephemerally and deleted afterwards? So when you use third-party tools that allow you to record meetings, for instance, and then save those, a lot of those tools save that content on their servers. So you have to ask, okay, am I okay with that? A lot of data privacy questions in mind. The first thing I recommend for every company, even before they put together ChatGPT, is put together an AI use policy. Which tools are you using? Which companies, or excuse me, which employees have access to those tools? What data are they sharing with those tools? Where's that data being saved? What's the policy around training? All these sorts of questions.
Love it. Love it. Well, we could talk about this forever. It's so fascinating. I want to tell everybody listening that you've got to get connected to Ross and Christine. Their contact information is around this video. Wherever you're watching, it could be up here, down here, because we live stream this everywhere. But get connected. Great people offering a lot of value in what they're doing. And Ross and Christine, I want to thank you for being on. Really great having you here.
Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay.